Hello, this is Sheshachalam from Astroguide Mysore, and today we are discussing about the Navamsa and the way we need to read Navamsa. So, what all do we actually see in the Navamsa? And I will be discussing each bhava of the Navamsa, that is, each house of the Navamsa, starting from the ascendant till all the 12 houses. This will be a lengthy video, but I will be trying to cover as much as I can. So, I have written down all the points which are required, and I will be slowly covering all these points today. Navamsa is not an easy chart to decipher, so it takes a lot of time and effort to understand this particular chart along with the Rashi chart and the Bhava chart. So when we see the Rashi, Bhava, Navamsa and the respective Amsha charts, only then a chart can be easily understood. But it takes time and effort and number of years of practice. So the first house of the Navamsa is the house where the ascendant is posited. So, what do we see from the first house? It is the self, that is Dhanu. It shapes the character of and behavior of a person with respect to relationship and how he portrays himself in the society. So, depending on the planets which are sitting there in the first house, the native will be discussing or with people in a certain way. He will be dressing in a particular sense in meetings or in personal when he is meeting somebody. So, how a person would be showcasing himself in the public will depend on how the Navamsa's first house is posited. The planets associated in the D-9 Lagna will influence the way he behaves and what he desires. So, this is a very strong, important point because this is not really what he is, but what he tries to put together to make a public appearance or to try to satisfy uh, the needs of the society. You need to be in a certain way with certain people in certain situations, and if you have a nice flexible planet like moon, like Jupiter moon combination, the person will be very charming. So the word charming, or a person is very straight, very rigid, non-spontaneous, this we can understand from the ascendant sign and its placements in the D9 chart. Okay, going to the second house. So I'll be doing like this in small pieces. I'll be able to tell you what actually all the 12 houses are. So, going to the second house covers many factors. Today, I am concentrating on emotions, sensitivity, and feelings. So, as it is also the third house from the 12th. So, the 12th house is one of the most strongest and important houses of the D9 chart because it is known as the house of intimate relationship, where you will be sharing everything with a person. So it shows and indicates the level of activity. Which one? The second house will show the level of activity of the 12th house because it is the third from the 12th. So, how much a person would go ahead to keep a relationship from not breaking? How much a person would go ahead and how far he will come to keep a marriage alive or marriage happening and marriage happy. So that effort can be seen from the second house of the D9 chart. It's also very important. So this is important in certain cases where many people will keep asking me that my wife has fought with me, she has left me, will she come back to me? Whether she'll listen to me? How much is the synchronization? What attachment these people have? The emotion and the emotional bonding the compatibility. When I discuss about marriage, I always talk about the five important things: physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and intellectual. And in a very jovial way, I call it PEPSI, which is the cola drink Pepsi. But it's not the Pepsi Cola, it is physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and intellectual. So the more the active or a fast moving planet is posited in the second house, the more the spontaneous the relationship will be, the more the spontaneous the native will be. And more the malefic and slow moving planet, more rigid, more sluggish, and a person with very less interest will be in will happen. That native will be like that. So my English might not be that fluent, but please. So the third house of the Navamsa, communication, understanding between partners and spouse is to be seen from the third house. We can see the interference of sibling in the marriage and interference of the sibling in business partner relationships. That's all the other things. But still, I am now concentrating on this particular point, which is very important, that this house also shows positive participation of the native in family activities. There are many people who do not do this. They do not positively participate in most of the family activities, but they will be very good at performing their duties and able to do things the right way. But many people are there who cannot positively participate in activities. And if you have a very tough planet sitting in the third house, the communication, miscommunication, misunderstanding can happen. So when you communicate and they understand it in the other way, they, in the sense your partner, your spouse, your business partners, if they understand it wrong, then you will not be, regarded much. So if you need to have a flair and good communication wherein your communication is understood, it's not that you do some complicated communication and they don't understand. Obviously, they will not be as learned as you. So this is a very nice, point which has to be seen in the D9 chart. So Sukhasthana, that is the fourth house. When D9, we need to see the fourth house, we call it as the um, quotient of happiness in a relationship, or we call it as Sukhasthana with respect to relationship. The placements of planets in this Amsha is to be clearly understood. So, if a planet, for example, is placed in the fourth house in the D1 chart, that is the Rashi Kundali, and is the same planet is placed in the fourth house in the D9 chart, excellent, that planet in its period of time will give very good results in married life and partnerships in business. The same way, if the fourth lord of the D1 is posited in the fourth house of the D9 chart, it will also give very good results. And Shukra is one of the Karakas for this particular thing. And if Shukra is posited in the fourth house in the D9 chart, it gives excellent results. So, the placements of planets in the Samsha is to be clearly noted. The more the benefics, the more the peaceful, stable, and comfortable a marital life will become. And this house represents the residence, the facilities, uh, the facilities where the couple stay. Luxury and comfort is to be seen from this house and its association. Just a minute. Please check the recording if it is happening. Yeah, thank you. So, the fifth house or the Purva Punya Sthana has to be understood in this way. The fifth house from the D9 ascendant. So the house in is which is seen to understand intellectual compatibility. So in this Pepsi, we understood the emotional compatibility, and I'll be coming to the other points also. So the fifth house is to understand the intellectual compatibility between two charts. But here we are talking about the fifth house of the native. So a strong benefic in the fifth house will give a very good understanding spouse. Very important for an intellectual person. See, everybody will not be always oriented with regard to one particular thing in life. They don't want always the emotional quotient, or they don't want the psychological thing, or they don't want his or her wife to be very spiritual, or his or her husband to be spiritual. So it is like some people would want that talk, that communication, that understanding between each other when they talk some topic. So, a strong benefic in the fifth house will give a good understanding spouse who will be knowledgeable to reciprocate and respond to the talk. So, the planet posited will indicate the traits of the spouse also. So, the people who we meet due to our karmic prarabdha, that is the karmic balance, whatever we had in our previous janma can be seen in this fifth house. The sixth house, that is the house in which you will understand the psychological compatibility. A good placement can give rise to joint goals. That is, both the husband and the wife will both want to do the same thing with all vigor, compassion, and that passion, not compassion. With all vigor and passion, they would want to do the same thing. So when two people join hands, obviously it is more than 10 people doing the same job without idea. If two people have the same idea towards one goal, they will be like an army. They can do a lot of things. So this is a very strong house, the sixth house. A strong malefic in this house helps in making the bond stronger because it gives a very strong motivation. It also gives the capability to protect the relationship from outside or third party influence. Very important point. If badly posited, this house may be the cause for divorce, misunderstandings, conflicts, unnecessary allegations. So, the sixth house in a D9 chart is very important because if you see the Bhavat Bhava, from the seventh house of the D9 chart, which represents the spouse of the native, the sixth house is the 12th. So, usually, I have seen that when the seventh lord goes to the sixth house in the D9 chart, it is better to marry a person who is of a foreign distance from the native's birthplace. So let us say if the native is born in Delhi, so he will be marrying a person from Bangalore or from England or from Australia. That marriage will be more stable. So going to the seventh house. Seventh house, very important because it is the first and the seventh which are actually calculated for the self and the spouse. So the place which represents the spouse, the house of marriage, the house of business, the house of partnership, the house of understanding a person whom you have not been living with all these years and suddenly that person is coming in your life. You need to understand what that person is. So a planet of opposition in this sign or house, that is, if there is a planet of opposition in the D1 chart in the seventh house, and if there is a planet of opposition in the D9 chart in the seventh house, it will indicate a strong disagreement between the partners. So there should be a good planetary position, that is, a Yoga Karaka planet, the fourth and the ninth lord, or the fourth and the fifth lord should of the D1 sitting in the seventh house of the D9 chart will give more mutual reciprocation between partners. So, unnecessarily, if there is a strong negative in the seventh house, argumentative spouse will be there, nagging, cranky spouse. So, you can see all these combinations in this today's world. If there is a strong malefic or there are strong malefics, then the spouse will dominate. It doesn't mean that when there is a malefic that the spouse will always, that the relationship will always result in a divorce. So there are some books which write that if there is Ketu Rahu combination in the 1 and the 7 or Rahu Ketu combination in the 1 and the 7, this particular axis of the D9 chart, that people will always go through divorce. No. I have seen umpty number of charts that no, they don't go through divorce. There is a lot of disagreement, and after a number of years, they will agree to disagree. It is like there are some traits in the husband which the wife knows it is going to be there. You can't change that. So she's okay with that. The same kind of traits in the wife, the husband also knows that he cannot change this. So he's okay with it. So he's okay to live with all those negatives, which he thinks that they are negatives from his perspective. But he will also be happier with regard to the placement, because that particular chart has the strength to protect and keep the marriage from not breaking. So if there are strong malefics, then the spouse will dominate. If there are strong benefics, then there will be mutual understanding between the spouse. A weak malefic or a weak benefic in the seventh house is not good, because the marriage, the strength of marriage will tremble. It will not be strong enough to hold the grip of, that is, hold water. That is, it will not be able to carry for a long time. So we need to see the strength in the Shadbala of the planets which are posited in the seventh house in the D9 chart. So unnecessary separation because of disagreement can happen if you have a weak benefic or a weak malefic, or if the seventh house is weak in the chart. So going ahead, we go to this. I still have the seventh house; it's not fully completed. An unafflicted Venus in the seventh house. Usually, people will ask this because this is Karako Bhavanashaya. Though Venus is the Karaka, that is the signifier for marriage and marital happiness and spouse in the boy's chart, and in the girl's chart, usually Venus is seen for married life, but Jupiter is taken as the Karaka for spouse. But still, when Venus is either posited in the first house or the seventh house of the D9 chart, there is a strong chance that the native might have different opinion of marriage, and if it is unafflicted, usually we have seen, that the marriage is either very late or there is no marriage at all. Even if the marriage is late, the native will be blessed with a super fantastic, very highly compatible spouse. Whether it's a girl for a boy or a boy for a girl, the compatibility will be very good. The modesty and the character of the spouse will be very excellent, actually. So that is why when we have the Karaka Venus in the seventh house, either he will give you a hard time finding a right partner, but if you find a right partner, he will be the best or she will be the best. So let us go to the eighth house. This house indicates longevity of married life. So longevity in the D1 chart means the longevity for the native. For the D9 chart, it really means the longevity of that Amsha Kundali, that is the longevity of the married life. So despite the D9 having great combinations, if it has a bad combination of planet in the eighth house, like bad combination in the sense that if let us say, if there is a moon with a retro Saturn or moon with a retro Mercury, these are all tough combinations in the eighth house for a D9 chart, unless moon and mercury are both very good lords of that particular chart. So just giving you an example, then unless if it has bad combinations of planets in the eighth, the native might suffer dissatisfaction, suffering, humiliation, litigation, divorce, marriage or in a breakup in relationship. So the eighth house is very clearly the longevity of married life or longevity of relationship or longevity of business also. Because I am telling you all the three, because it's not only relationship. If you are opening a business, we need to see the D9 chart and the D10 chart in collaboration. We should need to see both the charts together. So if the eighth is free of affliction, that means if there are no planets at all in the eighth house, fantastic placement, there no problem at all. And if the eighth lord is well placed, that is either exalted or in its own sign in the chart, even in the eighth house, in the D1 chart, 8th Lord in the 8th house in the D1 chart, and if the 8th house in the D9 chart is free, fantastic combination. There is no problem with regard to uh, marriage. And if you have a Vargottama, some cases it happens that the Lagna is also there, the 8th Lord in the 8th house in D1, same thing is repeated in the D9 chart. The native will acquire a lot of richness either by his own hard work or through marriage. He will fulfill his desires and will be happy, a person who is very happy in married life. So, when Viparita Raj Yoga happens in a strong way, never think that it's always negative. Sometimes, in some places, positivity is also to be seen. So, the ninth house, let us go to the ninth house, the Bhagyasthana, the house of higher thinking and spirituality. So the spiritual compatibility has to be seen from the ninth house in a D9 chart, and it is a very important house for after midlife, the life after midlife. So after 60s or 55s or 60s, you need to see whether a person is going to have what else of compatibility he will have, spiritual compatibility and intellectual compatibility. The physical compatibility will be like, eroding, and the emotional compatibility, you will have already known the person for years together. So if you are trying to understand the marriage and its strength, you need to understand the ninth house from the D9 chart. A meaningful marriage always gives fruit after the couple have crossed their 60s. So that's what my Guruji also was teaching me. So that is right. After a lot number of years of seeing charts, I have understood that if the ninth house of the D9 chart is strong, that particular marriage after a certain period of number of years looks better. The person will be much satisfied with the way his spouse is or her spouse is reciprocating with his daily life, because you would have retired from your office, you would be trying to make sense of what to do, and you have this person with you staying 24 bar 7. You need good compatibility, right? You need good understanding, and this is to be seen from the ninth house. So the spiritual compatibility is seen from this house. And if planets like Jupiter or any good planet or benefit to that particular chart, the native's chart, let us say a yoga karaka, it might be Saturn also. So if a person is born over Libra ascendant in the D1 chart, Saturn is obviously the fourth and the fifth lord, being a fantastic yoga karaka. And if it is sitting in the ninth house of the D1 chart, what else is required? Fantastic old age. So they will have very good compatibility. I am not talking about the longevity of the native. I am talking about the old age of the marriage. Fantastic it will be. So the native will have the same level of higher communication with his business partners or his spouse. So this is the mostly revered or referred phase of vanaprastha. That is the time when people will actually think of understanding the spiritual nature of this creation, and they will be intellectually ready for the last, that is the sannyasa. So where both help each other in their spiritual pursuits. This is a very important point, that they need to help each other in their spiritual pursuits. Okay, so going ahead, I have made all notes of it, because extempo I will not be remembering all these points. So I took the day off and started writing this. So the 10th house. So this house is the karmasthana in the D1 chart, and here it represents the wealth, the prosperity of the marriage. So, and also prosperity of business if the person is in business. So, the wealth, the social status, the stature of the person in the society is seen from this particular placement of the 10th house of the D9 chart. And strong planets like Jupiter, Sun, and Saturn, if they are yoga karakas, if they are benefic planets of the D1, will make a lot of understanding. or it will make a lot of sense to that particular D9 chart, because it gives the weightage to the chart and it will represent a strong, stable lifestyle and status throughout life. It's not easy for a person to have a stable lifestyle throughout life. So the D9 chart, 10th house is very important once again. All the houses are important anyway. So let us understand the 11th house. So in the D1 chart, 11th house is for sannyasa, 11th house is for profit, and 11th house is for the rogasthana, so many other things also, service. So 11th house is for friends. So now here in this, if you have a strong 11th house in the D9 chart, your friends, her friends, the spouse friends will all be in good understanding. You will have a good community support for your marriage. The 11th house is very important in the D9 chart, because after marriage you need a good environment in which you need to live. More the malefics in the 11th house in the D9 chart, the more the better it is, because the 11th house is also for growth. It shows the courage of a person. Why the courage? Try to understand this. If I take the Lagna, if I take these 5 fingers, if this is the ascendant, 1, 2, 3, this is the house of courage, Vikramasthana, third house. 1, 12, 11. This and this are the Arudas, or not Arudas, Argalas. So I have not done class on Argala, but still, the third house, if it is weak and the 11th house is very strong, the person becomes one way, adamant, stubborn, very difficult to manage, because he will not listen to anybody. And sometimes, if he has a good mindset and a good learning, he may go to sannyasa and practice hatha yoga. The other way around, if the 11th is very weak and the third is very strong, he will be more materialistic, want to do this, want to do that, I want to achieve this, I want to do that. He will never think of others. So both cases should be balanced. The third should have some planets and the 11th should have some planets, or both should be void of planets. And then what will happen? There will be a balance. And this 11th house gives lot of courage to a person in growing ahead, becoming very wealthy. They become extremely wealthy and stinking rich when you have a strong malefic in the 11th house, as there is a strong malefic in the third house. Both strong houses can make a person grow high, because third house is the starting of the Upachaya Sthana, the house of growth, and the 11th house is the end of the Upachaya Sthana, the house of growth. So 3, 6, 10, 11. So you need to see the placements of 3rd, 6th, and the 10th and the 11th in the D9 chart also, to understand how this person will grow ahead in life. So if there is a benefic like Venus or Jupiter, it indicates that the person has fear, apprehension. He is having, he is always going to take a step back and always do planning. So he will do a lot of planning. So there should be a good combination. Let us say I'll put a Jupiter and a Saturn both together in the D9 11th house. This person has a lot of balance. So because there is a malefic and also a benefic, so he will think and also act. If it is only a benefic, he'll keep thinking and thinking and thinking. When should he act? So that strength to go ahead and do something is from a malefic, not from a benefic. So the native, if there is only benefic or a weak benefic, then the native will lack courage to face the society or grow ahead or march ahead in life. So going to the last house, the 12th house. Venus is the Karaka for this particular chart, the D9 chart, and Venus is the Karaka for the 4th house and the 12th house. And here it is the physical intimacy which has to be seen in the D9 chart, and also how a person, is taken for his dressing habits, his eating habits. All these are physical traits. So when you eat bad, when you dress clumsy eating, and shabby dressing, people will not be attractive. So you need to be attractive. You need to dress well, look well, talk well and present yourself well. The 12th house has to be presentable with a Venus posited there. So Venus is the best, it gives the best results when it is placed in the 12th of the D9 chart, as it is the Karaka for the senses and sensibility, not sensitivity. A person who knows how to act sensible, as it is the Karaka for the senses, and the 12th is good for physical traits and physical intimacy. The intimacy is very important. So out of the Pepsi, this is the physical part. So physical intimacy. The physical compatibility in the marriage plays a primary role in bonding the relationship together, and hence the planets placed in the 12th matter the most in the D9, and because it's a marriage, a union of two genders. So it also indicates whether the native will get married or involved, because I'm not leaving away the relationship part, because marriage happens after, sometimes after relationship in many cases. So it will also indicate whether the native will get married or involved with a person of a different race or a country. So if somebody is asking me whether I'll be marrying this person or will I marry that person, he or she is from some other country. So we need to see all this in the D9 chart before doing our predictions. So a lengthy explanation, but I think this is helpful for people when they start the analysis of the D9 chart. Thank you very much.